And so my first guest, our first guest, is Kate Davies, who is hi Kate.
Hello.
Kate's a architect and media artist. She works as educator at the Architectural Association in London. She ran a design studio for quite a long time there, so like a project course in here, similar. She was head of media studies as well for quite a while. Are you still head of media studies, Kate?
As of this week, yes. Next week, someone else is taking over from me.
Okay, good. Great.
I have way too many hats, and I'm trying to throw them at other
Okay,
people.
yeah.
Yeah.
Because one of the other hats is she's co-directing now with Emmanuel Verkase the design and make at Hooke Park, which is like a forest-based course studio where they do a lot of design build projects where students build their own accommodation, their own libraries with the forest, in the forest. Super fascinating work. And so super happy to have you here, Kate. Kate will be talking about yet another project which she has, which is called Unknown Fields. That's been going on for, I think, about 15 years. It's a kind of how would you call it, like an expedition format where she and a colleague, Liam Young, go on these crazy expeditions. So they kind of spend 6 weeks on a cargo ship. I'm sure she'll show all of this and make quite amazing kind of hybrid documentaries about it, but also kind of design objects and do exhibitions about it. So it's really super exciting work, and it shows us, I think, also the intricacies of the material flows and the technological flows that we kind of often are only confronted with as consumers. So hence I guess the subtitle, The Dark Side of the City. I was going to bring the book, The Dark Side of the City, and I just noticed that I left it on my table at home, so I'll have to do that another time. But without further ado, Kate, I'm going to hand the word to you, and I'm super, super delighted to have you. And yeah, all yours.
Thank you, Thomas. Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Absolutely.
Yeah, and can you see a full screen?
Yeah.
Yep. Okay, awesome. I can't see you when I'm screen sharing, so if you need to get my attention, you'll have to shout at me. Right. So, as Thomas mentioned, I teach at the Architectural Association, Head of Hooke Park. I mean, there's a whole another lecture with that, maybe with Emmanuel at some point. He's much more involved in the physical production side of the timber architecture there. I'm here with an interest in the forest and the landscape. So we have our own working woodland. That's another conversation. So, as well as teaching at the AA, I practice as a visual artist, and I'm going to talk about that work today. It grew out of an interest developed from thinking about the city as an architect. So I trained as an architect, and thinking about the knock-on consequences of urban living, the other spaces created as its byproduct. And it grew into a kind of global scale urban thinking. The project of Unknown Fields is a I suppose mainly a visual arts practice we're both trained as architects, so with a kind of architectural speculation background thrown into it. And it grew in tandem with the unit that we ran for 8 years at the AA in diploma. To take the city and find its shadow was the kind of gist of it. I mean, I have a preoccupation with the competing value systems that govern the material of the ground. If you think about the land and the landscape, and the systems that distribute that and connect it to you and me in the kind of ordinariness of that in our day-to-day. I'm also interested in how creative work has a power to engage emotional and imaginative intelligence in a way that kind of other fields may not. And I'm interested in stories, and I'll talk a bit more about that later. So in the context of this talk, I'm going to describe briefly, hopefully, some of the work I've made as part of Unknown Fields, which is a project I run with Liam Young. Usually when we give lectures together in person, our talks are a bit more like narrative performances. So it's a bit more of a kind of reading with films over the top, but I'm going to talk a little bit more under the hood and talk through some of the thinking and the processes behind the work today. And it's really like fundamentally a way of seeing the city and a way of seeing infrastructural space behind the scenes as a space that reveals rich narratives. I'm going to show an overview, and then I'm going to go through 3 of the projects that we've worked on over the years. And it relates to a way of seeing the world and everything in it, as I've said, as a series of dynamic connections. So thinking about the invisible or immaterial structures that surround and kind of are contingent on material things. And this is closely tied into the things that we as designers design and make, and how this way of looking expands the scope of design in useful ways. I think it kind of sets up conversations about territories of architectural agency or design agency. So if we talk about the field in Unknown Fields, I think it's suggestive for me, certainly, of a number of things. So of a mode of practice. Field work is one of the kind of driving modes of practice that we use. So it's about the expeditions are key, going to the sites and operating within them. It suggests sites of operation, so it can be equally the oil field as the electromagnetic field. It concerns representational agendas, so the field of view, and disciplinary questions. If you think about the field of architecture. Field work in itself as an activity, it really sets the field as a territory in clear opposition to the studio. So it's outside the lab, on the ground, in reality. In the slips between artistic, anthropological, and scientific practices, it appears in various fields, obviously. And it's far beyond merely data collection. I think the product of field work is really the telling of a story firsthand. So we're looking with the work to try and unravel the complexities of place, of a physical place, and there's a kind of set of connected physical places through acting into and kind of drawing out of this field. And I think it with the aim of creating a kind of peculiar kind of work that mediates the site and the studio, if you like. And then in a lot of ways, it becomes a kind of prospecting, a kind of mining for sites of architectural operation, or trying to think of where architects, where designers could have agency beyond the kind of traditional site of operation. I like to think of these immaterial structures as stories, as I've said. I'm interested in the way that these immaterial structures and systems are narrated. So from poetry, geomatics, cartography, geology models, scientific reports, satellite images, LiDAR scans, climate simulations, but also photographs, paintings, literature, poetry, and myth. Each of these representations of the world or of landscape or of things narrate the world and make the world anew. So I've got this kind of GIF up here, which I gleaned off the internet somewhere, but big data, satellite mapping, global sensor array mean that information about places far away can be conjured to us in an instant, which wasn't always the case. And I think it's important to think about that shift. So stories or information about places across the other side of the planet are no longer notional or folkloric or anecdotal, but measurable, mapped and logged, and by the day, if you like, the world is more knowable. And I think this is an important thing to think about as a site. One of big data's biggest endeavors is the Human Connectome project, which is actually a massive project to map all the connections in the human brain, to produce a functional model of it. And I think similarly, big data collects and is drawing out a model of the world in a similar way, emerging as a kind of ghost ship from a space that wasn't there. So it's a kind of double, a kind of digital twin, if you like. Why am I talking about this? So I guess the point is that this model of this kind of network, it's both physical and it's digital, of a kind of global synapses, is forming an important emerging site. And I think it gives us new eyes. It enables us to see something, potential to see something too big and too complex for us. But I don't think we have the tools to describe this space in very human terms, other than the kind of abstractions that produced it in the first place. So the kind of abstractions of data and statistics and logistics seem to me a kind of poverty of language to describe an emerging site to operate within. So I guess it's about being able to use the kind of visual tools, the complexity, the emerging tools for visualization is another part of this. Being able to narrate big, complex issues in a way that enables us to engage with it in a meaningful way, I think is important. It's a rich cultural space. So fundamentally, I think the point is that the world's issues are systemic. To address them, we need to act systemically, and for that we need to think systemically, and so we need to try and see systemically, or try and visualize systemically. And stories are brilliant at this. So stories as structures have always been used to help us navigate things that are too big and to comprehend. Stories are useful connective tissue, if you like, so that they make sense of messy, complex, and abstract systems. You know, they make sense of this. This is the kind of back end of the world, if you like. That's I mean, I say all that because I think it just frames something about why we're doing the work we're doing. It's to do with trying to narrate infrastructural systems, not in the terms that they're, the kind of logical logistics terms that they're generated, but in a way that we can find meaningful. We can connect to them. This is an image I took in Madagascar, and I'm interested in how landscape is quantified and commodified in the interests of capital, and that's intrinsically woven into the fabric of a contemporary city. And the materiality of that ground relates to the immateriality of place and the cultural value. So, for example, sites of extraction and resource often overlap with indigenous or traditional homeland. And what we try and do through the project is not to address landscape in a romantic way, but embedded in realities of contemporary context. And that acknowledge that isn't trying to I suppose frame good and bad, but is trying to acknowledge complexity. Unknown fields. This is an image we took in Alaska. We did a trip. I'm not going to talk about that trip today, but we did a trip to far north Alaska, and it was about looking at where our imagination of climate change is playing out. It's also where one of the biggest supercomputing centers for global climate change modeling is located in Alaska. So there were these kind of two spaces that we were interested in. So unknown fields is nomadic design studio, we always called it, that ventures out on expeditions behind the scenes of the contemporary city. And these are landscapes that are embedded in our phones and in our toothpaste. And that's, you know, that kind of banality is something that I'm really interested in. Since 2008, we've done, I think, 14, 15 expeditions. I had a bit of a break over COVID. Making films and physical artworks from the material we've gathered on these field explorations. And there's spaces like these, so spaces of extraction. This is a gem mine in Madagascar. This is a lithium field in Argentina, and this also. Some spaces of extraction, you think about kind of mines, you think about dirty landscapes, they can surprise you by being actually kind of beautiful or not. Spaces of waste dumps, of manufacturing, of logistics, supply chain logistics, or computational infrastructure, among others. So I'm going to give a bit of an overview. I'm going to get your end to play this film, and I'm just going to read over it. The text actually appears on the screen, but I'm just going to read a bit, and then I'll tell you when to stop, if that's okay. This city dreams. It dreams of glittering things and far off places. The city casts shadows that stretch far. And this is a journey through the landscape, conjured into being by the city's needs, fears, and dreams. This city is made of a constellation of elseworld, the traces of distant mountains that walk the streets, are forgotten in pockets or lie in bedrooms and under beds. Its deepest desires and most fanciful whims, the small acts of millions carve canyons and forge mountains in distant worlds. You can stop that video now, and I'll screen share back again. Awesome. Thanks. So this is a longer video. It was a show reel that we made for a kind of composite film we made for an exhibition that accompanied the book set, The Dark Side of the City, for an exhibition. I this a while back now. But kind of we put a lot of our footage together as this kind of continual supply chain that kind of looped back to the city and away again. And I suppose the point is the idea that distant landscapes are embedded in global systems that connect them in really surprising and complicated ways to our everyday lives. And we're looking at this dialogue between here and there, where the local, so the kind of your everyday normal lives, are conditioned by this massive wide array of global supply chains, and the connections twist over everything, connecting the mundane to the extraordinary. This infrastructural space is also a part, I think, of a designer's realm. So we should really be questioning how the roles of designers, architects might be reassessed, say in relation to their sites of operation. So in an ever complex and more connected, more mappable world, this is a field, if you like, that necessitates maybe a different kind of field work and strange kinds of sites to operate within. So the idea, and this is exploded axle of an iPhone laid over a kind of logistics supply chain from China in a funky graphic. But that you redesign the product, you redesign this space. So you redesign the iPhone, you redesign the mines, you redesign the manufacturing facilities in China. And these journeys are stories, and so the supply chain is a story. You can re-narrate the story by the kind of the pull of the desire from this end, commercial desire for whatever product, whatever thing that needs to be made is redesigning that or re-narrating that landscape. So a landscape of circuitry is also kind of global landscape, if you like. So the first project I'm going to show is called Rare Earthenware, and this was a project that we did years ago now. We did 2 expeditions to China aboard a cargo ship across the South China Sea, through the electronic manufacturing centers, and as I say, like staying on board the cargo ship and visiting a number of different ports across China and looking at the kind of the shipping logistics, which is a big part of this. Following our electronics, essentially we were looking at light, slim electronics back to the raw material, so the mines in Bonobo. And we looked at it as a kind of reverse journey. So from shop to mine. Rare earth metals are fundamental. They're fundamental materials that enable the featherweight, the slim and seamless, the kind of aesthetic of contemporary technologies like mobile phones and slim laptops. They enable that because they can make very strong, very small batteries, among other things. So very strong, very small magnets, I should say. So they enable this kind of sleekness. We did this as a project that was commissioned by the V&A initially for an exhibition called What is Luxury? And so we were talking with them about luxury being thin and light in terms of technology. And so as our personal electronics tend towards the invisible, they conjure in their shadows this undeniably visible grey mountain and a 1 kilometre deep pit and a 10 kilometre radioactive tailings lake, which is what this image is of. So we were interested in that as a kind of counterweight to the lightness of the product that you get at the end. And the apparent, all the rhetoric, or the kind of advertising aesthetic for these kinds of technologies is about immateriality. It's kind of swooshy lights and everything's in the cloud and nothing exists. This is very real, and it's very not light and not immaterial. So this is toxic waste, which is is discharged from the surrounding factories, which are rare earth factories, rare earth processing plants, and it's got a cocktail of acids and heavy metals and carcinogens, radioactive materials. It's relatively highly radioactive, not usually, but relatively, including thorium and uranium, and this is the byproduct of processing the 17 most sought after minerals in the world. So they're known as rare earths, and then fundamental to contemporary technology. China produces at the time over 95% of the world's rare earths, and 2/3 of this is in Baotou, which is a pasture land, used to be a pasture land, now a wasteland on the edge of the Gobi Desert. And the nearby Bonobo mine, these kind of unpronounceable treasures, erbium, yttrium, dysprosium, europium, neodymium, are drawn from a 56 million ton treasure mountain, they call it. It's called the Treasure Mountain deposit, and it's the largest in the world. So the project was a film, and these vases which went on display in the V&A, and they used toxic mud from this lake mixed with some clay binder to craft a set of 3 ceramic vessels. So each of these vessels is sized in relation to the amount of waste created in the production of 3 items. So smaller ones smartphone, the middle one's a featherweight laptop, so you think about MacBook Air, and this a single cell of a smart car battery. Now that's a single cell. If we took the whole battery, it would be the size of the room. They've got a kind of weird burnish, which is the reaction in the mineral content during firing. And we liked the idea that they were this kind of material shadow. They're black, they're kind of ominous looking, of these technological objects. So in silhouette, they were kind of, they're supposed to echo the highly valuable Ming Dynasty porcelain vases, and they're called the sleeve vases. Traditionally, objects of high value, everything's Ming vase. It's kind of go-to high value object. They display wealth, vessels for both meaning and transporting goods, if you like. And Ming vases, as I said, they're particularly iconic, and they're also, interestingly, artifacts of international trade. So the Ming Dynasty was this kind of one family global superpower, presided over an international network of connections, trade and diplomacy that stretched across Asia to Africa, the Middle East and Europe. And that was all built on the trade of commodities like imperial porcelain. So there's kind of, I suppose, echoes of this idea of vast global trade. They're presented, I suppose, as objects of desire. They're presented in a showcase. You can't see it, but they were in a quite big showcase. But they've got elevated radiation levels and they're toxic. The dust off them is toxic. So they're not objects we would want to own. We also had to undo quite a lot of convoluted risk assessments for the V&A to put them in there, and they're in a special case, which we find kind of also quite kind of absurd in a way. If you think there's a community living with a 10-kilometer tailings lake of this stuff, and the vases, the case was there to protect the visitor from the vases, and usually it's the other way around. So I'm going to show a film in a minute, but we made a film as well as part of this, collaborated with a photographer called Toby Smith, and it's a short-ish film. I'm just going to let it play the whole thing, but in it's reversing. You'll notice at some point it's in reverse, so it's reversing the journey back from container ships and ports through wholesales, factory floors, all the way back to this lake, and it's a kind of unmaking of technology, if you like. That was done quite a long time ago now, I guess. Okay, so do you guys want to load that one up and just redisplay the whole thing? I won't talk over this one. Okay. The chap bravely collecting the radioactive waste from the tailings lake is Liam. Notice I sent him in there to do that. If you're worried about the ceramicist, so in relative terms, the radioactivity in those vases from and the period of exposure is relatively negligible. I mean, in comparison, you'd get a lot more exposure on a flight, for instance. You get quite a high level of exposure on a flight because you're not protected by the atmosphere as much from cosmic radiation. But on the scale of a 10-kilometer tailing lake and living there your whole life, it's a different story. Just to say that we weren't putting Kevin, our ceramicist, in danger. Although the V&A did want a lot of paperwork on that. Mostly it's the dust that is an issue. So if I go back to this. So yeah, I mean, I think yeah, I think I've said it all actually, that one. Next one, this I'm going to talk about is called the breast milk of the volcano. I will tell you why it's called that in a minute. So this was is also when we think about planning the projects and the expeditions, the kind of research. We're trying to engage with something that's relatively current, that's relatively in the news, or is something that's a kind of contemporary concern or a current concern. At the time we made this project, Elon Musk had just made a kind of a keynote proclamation about the electric future, so the future of electric cars and also house batteries. So a few years ago now, and we were interested to look at where we wanted to see the ground that future is going to come from. Not to negate the importance of moving to an electric future. I want to make that clear. We sometimes have had our work co-opted by, say, people we don't necessarily agree with to make a case for, say, not moving to electric futures. But I think we wanted to unpack a kind of this idea of this utopian future and find the ground that it comes from. So that ground is essentially quite a lot of it, and there are lithium fields elsewhere, but the majority of lithium in the world is concentrated within the lithium triangle, which is, I don't know if you know, between Bolivia, Argentina, and Chile. These are the lithium evaporation ponds in Chile, and the largest untapped reserve of lithium in the world by a mile is the Salar de Uyuni in Bolivia, which is this amazing kind of world-renowned salt flat, huge salt flat. Underneath that is a huge reserve of lithium salt, which the Bolivian government are in the process of developing. At the time, they were developing a set of pilot plants for lithium fields, basically. And it's also a mythical space for the local culture. So we did a trip, which did 2 trips here as well. Most of the projects we do 2, so we do a kind of initial reconnaissance trip, and then we go back and develop some more work, and then we go out mostly with a film crew and shoot the footage we need and do proper interviews that we need. So the trip was through these kind of energy landscapes, if you like, of the Bolivian salt lakes and the Atacama Desert, to see where this electricity that powers our technology is stored, where the it's storage, right? The lithium batteries, it's batteries, so it's about storing electricity, not generating it. And so here the ground is charged with this amazing potential. So buried here is this grey gold. They call it grey gold, called lithium, and it's the key ingredient in batteries. It's in everyone's pockets, in your phone, every device, every electric car, pretty much. And this is, they call it a grey rush, so it's grey rush territory. And it's also a landscape of Incan mythology, and sacred mountains and sacred volcanoes, where the traditional indigenous narrative of the Aymara people describes this shimmering white expanse as being created from the mixing of the tears and the breast milk of a weeping mother volcano, who's just lost her lover. So that's the volcano in this image. Cusco is the lover, and Tunapa is this volcano who's just given birth to the baby volcano on the side, and her tears and her breast milk flow down and form the salar. Now, what's interesting about that is it's pretty much a similar story that a geologist will tell you. So the salts from volcanic activity are brought up from the crust, under the crust of the earth, and then they will be kind of dissolved by rainwater over millions of years, and they will flow down and form the Salar de Uyuni. These are the same. This is the same story, which I love. And we wanted to kind of explore the idea of a creation story for the material that will store the power for the future technology. It's a kind of creation myth, or should we understand and unpack the idea of the creation myth? We can watch this one. This is the second last film. It's a little bit longer. There's a narration on it. We got a local Bolivian Aymara, a woman who's from the local area, who's of Aymara heritage, to narrate it. So it's at times it's kind of a little bit difficult to understand, but it's important. We thought that was an important thing. Do you want to play that one? And you can just watch it the whole way through. And the sound up, please.
Welcome everyone to basically the announcement of Tesla Energy. All right. So what I'm going to talk about tonight is about a fundamental transformation of how the world works, about how energy is delivered across the Earth. This is how it is today. It's pretty bad. So that sucks, exactly. I just want to be clear because sometimes some people are like confused about this. This is real, okay? This is actually how most power in the world is generated with fossil fuels. And if you look at the curve, that's a famous curve, the Keeling curve, which shows the growth in CO2 concentration in the atmosphere. And every year it ratchets up. It gets higher and higher. And if we do nothing, that's where it's headed to levels that we don't even see in the fossil record. So this is, well, I think we collectively should do something about this. And not try to win the Darwin Award. So for us and a lot of other creatures
Here, on these ancient salt flats, sacred mountains stand guard over a landscape charged with electric potential. A new future awaits. This landscape is central to the culture and mythology of the indigenous Aymara people, and it's pregnant with billion-dollar prospects. This ethereal place is said to become the feeding ground of a global green energy revolution. The drive for small and powerful batteries has rendered this landscape one of the most sought after on Earth. Buried here is a grey gold called lithium, the power in our pockets. It's fundamental to the charging and recharging of millions of gleaming electronic devices, and it's the future of electric cars. Half the world's reserves lie dissolved in brine beneath this salt crust, untapped. And for the people of the Bolivian Altiplano, its extraction brings with it unanswered questions of land ownership, resource royalties, and environmental impacts. Many of the natural resources, so fundamental to our contemporary technologies, begin their lives in sacred landscapes like these. When we imagine the futures these technologies promise, we rarely acknowledge the cultural origins of the material contained within them. The landscapes from which they are forged are often spaces of deep significance to the people who call them home. What is the true creation story of our battery-powered future? Not the story typically pitched on a product launch stage or flashed through in a tech conference presentation. It's one woven together from all the wild and mysterious forces which have brought this future into being, from the Big Bang to the battery. It is as much a story of dancing llamas and weeping volcanoes as it is one of chemistry, physics, and geology. All of these things give shape to our world.
There was one red pixel. Okay, in the blue square was a red pixel. Now it's zoomed in so you can see that red pixel. That is the size of the batteries needed to transition all of the United States to being solar with batteries. Okay, it is a very tiny amount. Okay. 1 pixel, just remember that. 1 pixel is the size of the batteries needed for the United States to have no fossil fuel generated electricity. This is no room at all. So not a problem for solar or batteries. Now, the issue with existing batteries is that they suck, okay? They're really horrible. They look like that. They're expensive. They're unreliable. They're sort of stinky, ugly, bad in every way. Very expensive. You have to get some sort of, you need to combine multiple systems. There's not one integrated place you can go and buy a battery that just works, which is what people really want to buy. So we have to come up with a solution. That's the missing piece. That's the thing that's needed to have a proper transition to a sustainable energy world. So the missing piece is what we're going to show you tonight. All right.
This landscape remains, for now, a territory of possibility, caught between the values of an ancient past and the promise of a luminous tomorrow. But if the future is electric, then the future is here, lying in wait for the world.
Which is what people really want to buy.
Cool. Let's share this again. Yeah, so I mean, there's another, as a side note, in the intro to that film, there's a picture from NASA of the night sky, which is from the Alma Observatory, which is one of the highest altitude observatories in the world, and it's in the Atacama Desert in Chile, which we visited. And it's really interesting because they're looking at the dark spots in the sky to look for the origins of the beginning of the universe. Essentially, they're looking for the kind of evidence of the Big Bang. One of the first elements that was created in the Big Bang was lithium. And the local Lecanantai people who live in the Atacama Desert, local to the telescope, their constellations are not the stars. Their constellations are the dark pieces, which they call the dancing llama, and I can't remember the other one, a snake. So there's this amazing kind of resonance between the kind of observation of the natural world and science, which would maybe in some ways tend to disregard a kind of origin myths from other cultures. So I'll just go through these photos a bit. As part of that project, we usually, it's a kind of film and a piece, a physical piece. We created this, which is a glass battery, and it's a sculpture. That's the contours of the Tunapa volcano in the middle, and it's alternating aluminium and graphite anode and cathode, and it's in a lithium brine electrolyte collected from the Sala, and it creates a very slow reaction. It's not particularly a kind of efficient electrolyte, but it can trickle charge a device. So the idea was to kind of trickle charge a device, a phone, with the drip charge of a crying mountain. So to kind of try and pull the two things together as a way of communicating some of those ideas together in the film. So while the world does its best to ignore that technology is forged from the earth, and with like I said, the marketing campaigns of ephemeral clouds and this push for small and light, the aim here was to try and embody the story of the landscape in which it was made. So try and tell this story through the film, through the objects. Final one, I promise you. Won't take too long. The final one I want to talk about is a project about fast fashion that we did. It involved, again, 2 expeditions through India and Bangladesh. looking at a fashion industry that's driven by desire predominantly, kind of what we want, what consumer desire, but has these vast planetary consequences. So, you know, on the catwalks of Paris and Milan and New York and London, you know, you've got camera flashing, models pouting, and, you know, sharp cheekbones, and but fashion's rolling tide dumps these mountains of cheap clothing on the high street shores. Objects of desire may be worn for one wild night and destined to be discarded. So we were interested in the kind of whimsical, on the one hand, kind of whimsical pull of demand, consumer demand, and this kind of motion, this setting in motion of a global industry that's reshaping developing economies across you know, half a world away. So the project's called Unraveled, and we were again kind of unraveling maybe notionally a piece of clothing from at the time there was a kind of a conversation about fast fashion and the kind of ethical implications of that going on. Before we wear them, our clothes make journeys of tens of thousands of miles in their process of production. So this makes textiles the most globalized industry on the planet, and the second polluter only to oil and gas, which was a surprise, I think, to us when we started looking into it. We traveled through the factory floors and fabric mills, where in these areas of textiles manufacturing, the rivers run with the colors of the season, if you like. So the chemicals used in the dyeing process are dumped into the rivers untreated, but those colors are defined by they're actually called color czars. They're fashion, some kind of fashion mafia that decides what colors are in season, and that has a knock-on effect to the kind of colors that are running through the rivers in India. So as part of the project, we made this gold cloth, and that was a collaboration with gold weavers in Varanasi, who are the last of their last craftsmen to be making like that hand making gold. It's actually gold thread into these amazing saris with hand looms. And the textile, we encoded the textiles. The pattern of it is a binary code, which is an audio file essentially of the stories and knowledge of these traditional textile weavers, as kind of from the interviews that we made of them. So the idea of kind of weaving into the fabric of oral history or oral knowledge of the disappearing heritage. And then the film is a procession of an Indian textile worker through cotton field to cargo ship, essentially. So of her walking slowly through the mills and fields and mills and factories and the supply chain. And she's gradually wrapped more and more throughout the process. As the fabric undergoes these transformations of weaving, dyeing, sewing, pressing, until she's completely kind of wrapped. And it's a procession that's a supply chain narrative. It's echoes of the textile workers who moved from the rural parts of India into the cities to work in the textile factories. It's echoes the catwalk. So we wanted to give it this kind of sense of the high fashion catwalk. And we end up in the shipbreaking yards in India, kind of looking out notionally to see the journey the clothes will be taking. So this was a piece we did. It was a commission by CCCB in Barcelona for an exhibition called After the End of the World, and it was a 4-channel video installation. So it's actually 4 different slices of the procession playing simultaneously, and then we flooded the gallery with water dyed with the textile dye, red dye. I think that was in 2018, And the fabric is a terrible photograph, but the fabric is hanging in the middle of the gallery. It looks awful there. It's actually really nice fabric. So let's play this. It's a lot shorter. It's only a trailer for what was the kind of full 4-channel thing. You play that, and that's the last film. Actually, just pause it for a second. Sorry. Just to say we were interested in this idea of fast fashion and being beyond the pace of the planet. So the rhythm, the sound that you hear is the rhythm of the hand loom, which acts as a kind of metronome for the film. And you'll see as well, it's shot on a high-speed camera, so which means it effectively means you see it in slow motion. So this idea of speed of production or rate of production that's unsustainable was something that we were interested in. Sorry. Play. Cool. I mean that's it really. I wanted to leave you with a quote, which is by Rebecca Solnit. To become a maker is to make the world for others, not only the material world, but the world of ideas that rules over the material world, and the dreams we dream and inhabit together. And I like that quote because I think it frames some of what I think is the imperative of designers to tap into this realm of ideas which has physical consequences, and this kind of emotional intelligence and the emotional intelligence involved with that, which I think is underrated sometimes. I think that's it, Thomas. I think I've overrun a bit. Happy to take questions. Also happy if you've run out of time.